In After Effects, let's import our sequence. Just double click the project section to open up the import dialog, and we're gonna just get the first frame here. PNG sequence is ticked, so it's going to automatically detect the whole sequence. We also have the multi-pass layers, and we could do this one by one, which is, you just select that particular frame from that layer or multi-pass. Let's also go to view and list here. It might be a bit easier to identify these. They are all rendered to the same folder. So we could start with ambient. Let's move across and do the Atmos. So this is one way to do this, and it shouldn't take too long. But you could also double click and do all of this at once. So Control A, and this may freeze. So if that keeps happening, you just have to do this one by one. Anyway, if everything is selected, we can do multiple sequences and then import. Let's go to our main layer, and I'm gonna go right click, interpret and main. And we need to assume a frame rate the same as we were working at in Cinema 4D, so that's 24. Then we can interpret, remember interpretation, and apply it to the other sequences too. Then we can bring this to a new composition button. It may be worth just doing a test render. From frame 1, press B to set this as the beginning of this sequence, and maybe do half quality. So here is a preview of the full animation. We want to check to see if the loop works at the end here. This is something you would probably check, earlier in the project, but I had done this a couple of times before, and I know there was gonna be no issues. When we first put this in the composition, let's make sure that we are using the correct color management. If I go to this drop down, I'm gonna go to Project Working Space. That's this icon with the 3 colored dots. And in here, we are using 16 bits per channel, which is correct because that's what that's the bit depth we rendered out our frames at. So that's going to allow us to extract as much information as possible. My working space is this sRGB profile at the top, and that's my actual display's working color space. So this looks just like it did in Cinema 4D, but there are several other color profiles here. A popular one is Adobe RGB, for example. If I choose that one and click OK, you will see my image is going to look different. It's not as saturated as sRGB was, and I would have to make some adjustments to this in order to get the same look and feel that this frame looked like in Cinema 4D. So really this should be matched to our render and how we have been working up to this point. But I just want to emphasize that if you find your images are not looking like you expect, it could be to do with that color management section. So just to make a few changes on top of this, this is pretty much how I want it to look, but I want to just make the astronaut stand out a bit more. And for this, I am going to use the ambient pass. I want to make use of these edges, or this outline effect with the Fresnel. So using the ambient layer and the object buffer for the astronaut, we can go to the track matte menu. If it's not there, press F4 to cycle to it. And then on the ambient layer, let's go to Luma Matte and point to the layer above. Then we can right click, pre-compose to move these 2 layers to a composition on their own. Let's call this the edge effect. So what I can do with this is stylize and glow. let's lower the threshold to make it stronger or weaker, about 40%. And the radius maybe go to about 20, 25. Set the blending mode to add or screen, so it blends on top of the original image. And this is a quick before and after. I'm also going to take the main image sequence and bring it in here with another buffer. Let's do the same Luma matte and pre-compose these two layers also. This is going to be astronaut pre-composed 1. I'm going to move the edge effect to the top, disable it for a moment, duplicate our new astronaut pre-composition, and on the lower one, I am going to go to blur and sharpen and do a fast box blur. Let's put the radius about 20, 25. It's going to create this outline around the astronaut, but it's not going to appear really that much until I change the blending mode to add. And it's going to create this glow below the astronaut, and then combining that with this other effect up here, it's just going to help to make the astronaut stand out a bit more. So on top of everything, we can now do some color adjustments. With an adjustment layer, go to Effect, Color Correction, and Lumetri Color. This is my favorite color adjustment tool in both After Effects and Premiere Pro. So let's start with the temperature. I generally like to warm up my images, so about 25. Sometimes adding a bit of purple can work in the tint. We could try green the other side, but that doesn't look as nice. So leave the tint neutral. We could do things like adjust the exposure, and because these are some 16-bit images, there is quite a lot of latitude in that. But it's already bright enough, I think. We don't need to really do too much there. We could lower the highlights if we maybe think it's blowing out too much. So maybe about -20. Not a huge difference, but noticeable. In the curves, let's go to the red channel to start with. I'm going to lower the red. And then in green, we can fade the shadows. And I'm going to do the same in blue, but not as much. So about halfway as much as green. And then in the master curve, which combines all three, we can maybe just create a bit of contrast, that sort of shallow S-curve, and maybe fade that even more. So this would be a pretty good final look. Perhaps there is too much green in the shadows though, so let's dial that one back just a bit. We can go further down to the hue and saturation curves section to make some adjustments here. So the hue versus hue, we can use this to change colors from one to another. So let's say the blues, we create a couple of handles either side, then select the blue color. We can make that more cyan or more blue by going down in this direction. If you go too far, it's going to change it completely. And once again, we have enough bit depth information to be able to make these kinds of color adjustments. I am maybe just going to put in a bit more blue, but not much else. We could go to the oranges, and these handles, by the way, kind of overlap and come back around to this side. So the other handle I would have to put about here. Then for the oranges, if I move it, you see it affects the other side. So maybe here, just make them a bit more red, but not too much. So that's all the composition work I am going to do here. A lot of the look was achieved in Cinema 4D, but I just wanted to make those adjustments. This is the original frame, and this is the one with the adjustments. We didn't end up using all of the layers in After Effects, but we did use the ambient on the astronaut, and maybe we can use the reflection to enhance that part of the frame. It's the only thing on this layer, so I don't need to mask it. We could just add it on top of our original, but that might actually be too strong there. So maybe only at about 20% should be fine. Anyway, let's export this. Go to Composition, Add to Render Queue. Before we do that, we should make sure to cut out the first frame. So if I press the page down key to advance forward one frame and then press B, that's going to make that the beginning of this composition. So we are discarding that first frame. Anyway, the output module, I'm going to choose QuickTime with the animation video codec. This is going to create a big file with a lot of color information, so that if I want to make more changes later in Premiere Pro, for example, I will still be able to make some adjustments without degrading the image. We can save this anywhere, so I'm just going to go to the class folder. Let's call this wormhole main, and hit save, and then set the render to go. We can press the caps lock key to disable the preview and just render a bit quicker.